Alex, it's great to have you back on the show. I loved watching football all weekend. I want to start with Arch Manning, and then we'll get to your very first start in your college career. But you could tell early on that he was struggling. I thought it might be nerves, but as the game continued, we continued to see some weird mechanics, some arm movements that seemed a little bit bizarre. His feet never appeared to be set, and he was skipping balls to his receivers. What did you see from Arch as that game proceeded against Ohio State?
Well, look, I mean, as a young player, and Arch is still a young player, despite what the media would make him out to be. That's a pretty classic example of somebody getting a little overwhelmed, right? I mean, that's a really good defense he faced for sure. The speed was, I think the speed was there. The scheme, much was talked about the scheme, obviously, with Matt Patricia, being pretty challenging coming from the NFL, bringing some concepts. And I think ultimately that kind of got to Arch. Definitely early, you saw him, like you mentioned, the mechanics unravel a little bit. That's a sign of somebody that's just, their process is sped up too much, right? And so, I think it's a good learning experience. And I think for those that don't know the Arch Manning story, other than maybe his last name, is, Arch Manning really hasn't played very high-level football up until this point. His high school in Nashville was not very good. They didn't play at a high level. He was a good player, obviously, and there were some good players that have come out of there. But in general, it's not like he was playing in the Trinity League in California or somewhere out in Georgia or in Texas. And then even some of the games he played last year was not against top-tier talent most of the time. And the time it was not super consistent. So he's in a place where he's a really gifted player, but he's got to get better and get more experience underneath his belt. So I think you're going to watch this year. You're going to see him really improve significantly because of what he went through on Saturday.
Do you have any concerns about the mechanics, in terms of, the ball coming out low or, he just seemed to be off target. And I'm wondering if was there something wrong with him maybe, or is that just a case of being sped up to where you're uncomfortable and so nothing is going well for you?
Yeah, we like to call it seeing ghosts, right? All of a sudden, like you feel like a guy's around you, so you move your feet like you're sliding. You saw it, right? Like he was like sliding away from nobody to try and make a throw sidearm. He was seeing ghosts. Like he was just, everything was moving a little too fast for him, and that's super fixable. I mean, that's something that once you watch the tape and you get comfortable and you kind of get back into who you are and your confidence level, you can it's really easy to fix, especially for a guy like him. Like he'll probably watch a couple of those throws, those little shallow routes that he missed behind and stuff like that, and he'll be able to fix that right away.
We're talking with Alex Brink. I was thinking about you as I was watching that because I'm like, dude, Alex has been through the whole thing. He can relate to everything that Arch is feeling right now. So take us back. What game was your very first start in your college career?
Yeah, I saw a lot of ghosts in my first start. It was down in Corvallis at Oregon State, and Mark Banker, the defensive coordinator, he had my number most of my career, frankly, but definitely as a young redshirt freshman, he got after me pretty good there too. My process was also sped up. It's also interesting, and this is similar to Arch's story. I had played earlier in the year. I played in the second game of the year against Colorado, came off the bench, and actually played really well. But then you have your first start, and him, Arch even more so, whole offseason of expectation, all the conversation, Heisman Trophy candidate, all these things. It's starting is harder than coming off the bench. That's just the reality of it. And so the mentality and the way it goes and managing the entire game. And so I remember feeling very overwhelmed in that first start, and then really settling in. My second start was against USC, and that was Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, Matt Grudega, the entire Lofa Tutupu, that defense where most of them went in the first round, it felt like. And I felt better in that game than I did in the game against Oregon State the week before.
So you weren't too concerned after that first start against Oregon State?
No, not at all, because there's good things, right? Like just like Arch, think about the big throw down the sideline in the whole shot at the end to get the team in position kind of before they went out on downs. He had some really good moments, I think, and that's really what you lean into. It's like, oh, he can do it. It's not like he can't do it at that level. He can do it at a really high level, obviously. And so you take those good moments, you say, okay, I can do it, and you just try and build on those.
Hey, how were you taught to run a QB sneak? Because I think Arch may have ran the worst QB sneak I've ever seen in my life. But what were you taught to do, and what are you supposed to do? I've never asked you this question before, but you're under center. You're going to run the QB sneak. What are you trying to accomplish there?
Well, there's a couple different versions of this. First of all, I will say this: as a quarterback doing a quarterback sneak, you are very much beholden to what happens with the guys directly in front of you.
Of
And
course.
for him, the guys directly in front of him didn't do a lot. But that being said, you're kind of trying to look for a bubble or a crease, right? Where's the biggest gap you can find? And what happened to him? They were all stacked up over the center and the guards. Sometimes you almost need to slide as you move forward, slide to the outside gap, like outside the guard, in between the guard and the tackle, because that's where the space is. And so, you got to get your pads low, obviously. You got to keep your feet moving. He didn't really have a chance where he started. Maybe he could have slid off to the side, maybe not. I kind of felt like that was just too much pressure, just too much pressure on him, honestly.
All right, one more question from the Ohio State-Texas game. You had a chance to work with Julian Sayin, the Buckeyes' new starting quarterback down at Elite 11. He really impressed me with the way he managed the game. What are your thoughts on Sayin and then also the way he played in that game against Texas?
Well, you kind of saw the best of what Julian Sayin is, and that's really, really Joe Cool, man. Like cool, calm, collected, never seems to get overwhelmed. Incredibly accurate. I mean, talk about a guy putting the ball in between a guy's face mask, on a guy's face mask, right? It seemed like he was consistently throwing the ball with a high level of accuracy and giving his guys a chance to win. And that's what I knew from Julian, coming through Elite 11. Really gifted player. I mean, 5-star level player, all the things. And, sometimes when you go to Ohio State, you get, even now in the NIL world, you kind of get buried a little bit on a roster or transfers come in. And when it's your time, you want to take advantage of it. And he certainly, I felt like, did that in his first start.
We're talking with Alex Brink, former Coug, now with E4 Sports, here on the Rip City Drive, taking a look at Week 1 in college football. All right, Kalen DeBoer, the Bama Crimson Tide got off to a bad start against Florida State when they got beat down by a more physical football team. And I guess what I'm curious about with Kalen DeBoer, his track record tells us what he is. He is a terrific football coach, but he's having great struggles at Alabama. And, of course, he's taken over for a legend in Nick Saban. I'm just wondering if maybe sometimes, depending on the coach and the personality, if maybe down south is not the best fit for Kalen DeBoer. But what are your thoughts on some of the struggles you're seeing with Bama and Coach DeBoer right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a couple of things are happening at the same time, and they're not necessarily all Kalen DeBoer's fault at Alabama. He's obviously taken over for a legend in Nick Saban. He's trying to put, his stamp on the program, whether it's processes or systems or recruiting or whatever. And that's always a challenge. There's always, I think, a transition period. The problem is you don't obviously have, much time at a place like Alabama to go through that transition period. I think the second thing that's happening that probably isn't talked about enough is that the school, and there's probably a couple of them, but Alabama certainly being one of them that is being hurt the most by transfer portal and NIL is Alabama. In the past, Nick Saban could go out and get nearly every 5-star that Kirby Smart wasn't getting at Georgia and put them on his roster at Alabama. And for the most part, they would never leave, right? And there's an argument to be made that they might have been getting paid while they were doing it, but we don't know for sure. But that being said, now with the transfer portal, it is starting to democratize the entire system where if somebody has the money to pay for an athlete, they will go to that school, not just because they're Alabama and the Crimson Tide, but because they want to play or because they're getting paid more money or whatever. So Alabama's roster, although still good, is also battling the fact that other rosters are also still good, right? And so I think that challenge, coupled with just the idea of DeBoer going down into Tuscaloosa, I think those things are creating some headwinds, frankly, for that staff. And now the problem is once you start losing a little bit and there's some chinks in the armor, well, now you've got a real problem because a place like Alabama, that fan base is going to rip it apart, and so will the national media and all the things. And so you're fighting this kind of three-headed monster while trying to manage this organization.
Wow. Well, it's going to be a storyline to watch, and the pressure is going to continue to grow down there in Tuscaloosa. I want to ask you about the Ducks. I was impressed with what I saw in Week 1. I know it's against Montana State, but it's hard to find better balance when you have 253 yards through the air and 253 yards on the ground. But I really liked what I saw from Dante Moore, who you've talked about this before, getting a year to sit back and watch and learn and understand the system run by Will Levis. He looked real comfortable out there.
Yeah, and I mean, I tell you what, I love Dante Moore. I mean, I've loved him since I met him at Elite 11. I thought he was solid at UCLA. I thought that was kind of a little bit of a raw deal, and I think it was a good move for him to get out of there and go to Eugene and sit behind Dylan Gabriel, learn the Will Stein system, like really get a feel for it, and now come back with a high level of confidence. And look, Oregon's at a point with Dan Lanning where they're just reloading, right? There's not really a down period because of the way they recruit and the NIL budget and all the things. So if you are a guy like Dante Moore who's got a lot of ability and who's a smart football player, you're kind of walking into the perfect scenario, And so I thought they looked great, like you said. Regardless of opponent, you think about last year. I mean, a really good Duck football team struggled mightily with Idaho last year at home, and this year they really took care of business. And it's a credit to the coaching staff to get them ready, but also that roster is I think really well built.
It's Alex Brink here on the Rip City Drive. Elsewhere, Oregon State struggles in game one, and it's just a product of Coach Brady continuing to build the program, and it's going to take time because when you bring in those guys, a lot of different guys from the portal, I just don't know how you make that mesh. But what did you see from Oregon State in that game against Cal? And I got to give Coach Wilcox the credit, man. They were ready to go in that opener.
Well, yeah, and I was going to kind of say that I think as much as we want to make that game about Oregon State, I do think that we got to give a lot of credit to Cal. One is Justin Wilcox, for sure, and I think their ability, Coach Wilcox's ability to craft defenses that are very stingy, and along with co-defensive coordinators Terrence Brown and Vic Soto, like those guys. They do such a good job on the defensive side of football. So I wasn't really surprised that they gave Oregon State a lot of trouble, like you said, with Malik Murphy starting a transfer. You've got, you're trying to get the offensive line going, even though you have good backs. So offense is usually a little behind. Where Cal deserves a lot of credit is on the offensive side of the football. Brian Harson's calling the plays. They went out and got Jaron Sangapulatele, who was a original Oregon commit, 5-star kid that went through the Elite 11 process, was a real late bloomer from the state of Hawaii, and he is special, Chad. He is a really, really gifted player, and they went out and got him after he decided to leave Oregon. And if you watch him play, I mean, he maybe missed 2 or 3 throws that were on him. The rest of it was as good as he gets, right? And I think that's what makes Cal a really dangerous team and probably took Oregon State by surprise a little bit because a true freshman should not be able to operate like that.
Well, I surely liked some of Murphy's comments after the game. And, he showed some flashes with his ability in terms of what he can do in terms of moving around, but particularly with his throwing. I was impressed. But after the game, he said, I feel like I've got a lot more to do on offense, and not even just like playing-wise. I've got to be better, just being more coachable, being there for my teammates, creating more plays. We left a lot on the table, getting the ball in the paint. It's hard to win a game when you don't score points. So I've got to do a better job of keeping the ball moving forward and not giving the ball back when our defense just came out the field. Like, he took accountability and is providing some of that leadership. I like him. What's your take on where Murphy's at?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me one bit. I mean, got to work closely with Malik out of high school at Elite 11, and then he was back this summer as a counselor and got to be around him again and kind of listening to his story at Duke and the opportunity. He feels very thankful for the opportunity he's getting with the Beavers, and he's a very talented player. I think he's got a great head on his shoulders, and those comments really reflect that. And he knows, like, it's going to be on him to make sure if the running game can't go, right, then it's going to land on him. And that's hard as a quarterback because you're at your best when you have a balanced running game. But at the same time, he knows he's good enough to carry that team. And even when it's hard, he feels like he can find a way to do it. So I think it's super mature. I think that's a mature response. I also think, frankly, Oregon State needs to run the football with more balance if they're in general going to have success offensively.
I wanted to ask you, what impressed you the most week one of college football? What jumped out to you?
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, I already talked about Sangapulatele at Cal. That was just really, really impressive, frankly. I think that LSU win. I mean, look, there's a lot was made of Brian Kelly and being able to go into Death Valley and beat Clemson. Kind of made Cade Klubnik look like a fish out of water. I thought that was a really impressive win also.
All right, what about the Cougs? They had to sweat one out against Idaho. What did you make of the Cougars' performance? You were on the call for that game.
Yeah, I feel like that's a leading question, Chad, because that's not one of those things. That's not something that impressed me with the Washington State performance in college football this week. Washington State really struggled with Idaho. Idaho's got a new coaching staff, but they came out and played really well, honestly. And the Cougs, I think, showed some flashes under new head coach Jimmy Rogers. Offensively, they just could not operate. I mean, they couldn't run the football at all. I think 3 total yards rushing. When you take away some sacks and stuff, you know, they went with a new quarterback, Jackson Potter, who's a young player, no starts under his belt, looks the part. Probably didn't get a chance to really, really let it fly as much as he should. The one touchdown drive, I think every positive play was a pass from him. And so I think offensively they're going to need to spread it out a little bit more than they maybe thought. Defensively, though, they did look really good, which is kind of the Jimmy Rogers calling card from South Dakota State, one of the top defenses in the country last year, brought a ton of players over. They flew around. They really attacked the football. I think if the Cougs are going to win games this year, it's going to be because of that defense holding teams under 21 points. And so in the end, they're 1-0, not 0-1, and that's really all you can ask for, frankly.
Yeah, they held Joshua Wood to 33 yards passing on 12 of 20, which is impressive. But you mentioned the rushing game, 22 carries for 3 yards. They averaged 0.1 yard per carry. That's not going to get the job done, Alex.
No, and there's a lot made in the offseason that they wanted to have balance and be more of a run first, not run first, but kind of a more balanced running attack than even they have been in these kind of new versions of the air raid the past few years. And, use more tight ends. They brought over 3 backs from South Dakota State plus 1 holdover. They thought they had some good players, and they just couldn't get going. And I think some of that was attributed to some new pieces on the offensive line, for sure. Some of it was attributed to a good Idaho defense really selling out against the run. But in the end, Jimmy Rogers said this, the Cougs need to make adjustments faster in game than they did. They kind of kept going back to the same well, and they couldn't get water.
Who do you think's got a tougher road ahead, Kalen DeBoer or Bill Belichick?
Kalen DeBoer, no doubt about it. I mean, one, Kalen DeBoer is not Bill Belichick, obviously, right? There's a little bit longer leash for a guy like Bill Belichick. The expectations in Chapel Hill are completely different. Even if it's Bill Belichick there, they're completely different than in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Certainly following, one of the greatest college football coaches of all time, in Nick Saban. So I think DeBoer's got a really tough road ahead of him if he doesn't turn around quickly. Whereas, Belichick, if for some reason it doesn't work out, people kind of get it, right? Like this is a thing that has happened before, or some version of it. And I don't think that would surprise anybody, right? This is college football nowadays is a very different game than the NFL. Again, like there's some level of expectation for both. I just think DeBoer's in a much tougher spot.
And with the changing landscape in college football, I think DeBoer's buyout is close to $70 million. With the way these schools are operating now and having to spend so much money on players, and they're going to their boosters to get money for NIL, a lot of these schools can't afford the massive buyout, even if they wanted to make a change at coach. I think Kirby Smart right now has got like $118 million to buy him out. Like schools can't do NIL and spend that type of money on coach buyouts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point. It's also a fantastic exercise in peeling back why we're even in this position to begin with college football. And most of it has to do with coaches' salaries and facility spends, which is now why we've gotten to this NIL world. And the reality is there's just not enough dollars to go around for all three of those things.
Yeah, you're right. One other question for you, because I'm always curious what's going through your mind as a quarterback and the way you watch the game. Week 1 of the NFL season's coming up. What storyline or maybe a couple of things are you looking forward to seeing in week 1? Is it quarterback related? Is it something else? What are you excited about?
I mean, I'm just excited about all of it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that works.
I'm really intrigued. There's a couple things I'm intrigued by. Some of the guys that obviously I'm close with or know of as far as like offensive systems. I'm really intrigued by what happens in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell and J.J. McCarthy.
Yes.
I really want to see like how that plays out because I think Kevin O'Connell is as good as it gets, similar to Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur and all those guys. We're going to find out if he can go from if he's really a plug and play quarterback system like some of those other guys, right? So I want to figure out what that looks like. I'm as intrigued by everybody about the Michael Parsons trade, and like, is that going to move the needle for the Packers in a very significant way, which probably should. I'm wondering too, like, do the Dolphins kind of get back to that form that they had a couple of years ago, and can Tua stay healthy? And then I just saw, recently the Matthew Stafford's going to start. What are the Rams going to be like? Are they really going to, is he going to be healthy enough for them to be in it? And then probably the last one for me, and this is, again, semi-personal, is I'm interested to see what the Seahawks do, right? I love Sam Darnold as a player. I thought he was awesome in Minnesota, had a raw deal kind of before that. I want to see if he's able to kind of do the same thing under Clint Kubiak up in Seattle, and if they can have success.
Well, it's going to be so much fun. Alex Brink from E4 Sports. All right, we're entering fall, so school is now getting underway for a lot of kids. What do you guys have going on at E-Force? What's the focus?
Well, there's so much going on at E-Force right now. A lot of it has to do around our sports performance training, so strength training, speed training, injury prevention, agility, quickness, all those sort of things. Anywhere from age 8 to 18 and above. We have different sorts of classes, different options. We've got 3 facilities here in the metro area, one in Milwaukee off of McLaughlin, one in Beaverton off Allen Boulevard, and then we have a new one up in Vancouver as well for those in Vancouver or in the North Portland area. So if you got an athlete that's looking to get faster and stronger, improve in their sports, check out e4sports.com. You can click on our performance training tab, learn all about our classes, open Monday through Saturday, morning and afternoon time, so fits around schedules and sports schedules and work schedules. Really great opportunity for young athletes to improve in all facets.
All right, Alex Brink, former Coug, E4 Sports. He'll join us every week to talk football. I need to find a cigarette and smoke it after that conversation, man. I'm feeling good as we get ready for the first week of the NFL and week 2 of college football. Thanks for your time, buddy.
We're back, baby.